Hi guys, sorry it timed us out. So we'll go ahead and finish our last little section here. So page 34, Rebel Forces. George Washington took command of the Continental Army, the colony's main fighting force, on July 3rd, 1775 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He immediately took steps to build a professional army. It wouldn't be easy. Washington despaired over the inexperience of the volunteers, the constant desertions, and a paralyzing lack of food and military supplies. Sometimes redcoats would shoot rebel soldiers at will because the rebels didn't have enough gunpowder to shoot back. There were three types of fighting forces against the British. You have George Washington's Continental Army, which it says most men in this volunteer army were private citizens who had signed on for a year or less. The great majority brought their own weapons, food, and clothing. Some colonels bought uniforms for their regiments, but most soldiers never owned one. They wore hunting shirts instead. Compared to their opponents, the men had little training and even less pay. Though the soldiers were promised money and land for their services, the Continental Congress rarely paid on time, if at all. Sometimes there were as many soldiers who deserted each day as there were men who signed up to fight. To fill their ranks, rebel forces began accepting free blacks and later accepted slaves. By the war's end, some estimated that 1/4 of the Continental Army was black. The Army also got their tremendous boost from foreign volunteers, including experienced, quick-witted leaders from France, Germany, and Poland. A handful of Washington's highest-ranking officers were brilliant leaders, but many were unfit for office and looted, sold army blankets, and disobeyed orders. The officers included Boston bookseller, a breeches maker, a horse dealer, a hat maker, an innkeeper, a blacksmith, and an English corporal who had deserted, a preacher, a butcher, a farmer, a farmhand, a tanner's hand, a swineherd, and a dancing teacher. Then over there on right beside it, they have the general, Rhode Island artillery officer, Massachusetts artillery officer, Green Mountain Ranger, a Maryland state troops, Canadian light infantry, Moylan's light dragoon, New York's Continental Line, Connecticut's light horse militia, Georgia's infantry, Maryland infantry, and the French infantry. Over on our next page, so page 35 at the top, it has the Continental Navy. A feisty infant navy defended the coast. At its height, it only had 57 ships. The Navy couldn't hope to challenge the huge British warships, so it tried its best to damage the British trade and capture or destroy enemy vessels. The Americans also had a trick up their sleeves. They were getting extra help from as many as 1,697 privately owned armed vessels. These privateers preyed upon the enemy merchant ships. George Washington was part owner of at least one of them. Then you have your lieutenant, ordinary seaman, and comrade. Sorry, guys. Then, down in our next section, we have militias. Since long before the Revolutionary War, many local areas in every colony except Pennsylvania had raised separate armed forces called militias to defend the communities from attack. Most of these soldiers had even less training than the men in the Continental Army, and their record was mixed. But militias played a crucial role in every one of Washington's victory, and they were very effective. They were very effective in some other important battles as well. This was partly because their style of fighting was new to their enemies, but it was mostly because they could raise enormous numbers of men on short notice and outnumber their opponents. And they have their ranchers and their frontiersmen, your riflemen, and your Connecticut foot guard. Over there in that picture, they have the Haitian soldier. So right down here, Haitian soldier. It says, in the open field, the rebels do not count as much, but in the woods, they're formidable. They lie like bacon hunters and slip from one tree to another. Down at the bottom, it says, as difficult as things were for rebel forces, they did have some strong advantages. Though George Washington drilled his army in the British-style warfare, rebel soldiers had learned from fighting with Indians to travel light, hide in the woods and mountains, and use ambushes and lightning raids against the unsuspecting enemy. They could move quickly and their earth-toned homespun and buckskin clothes let them melt into the countryside unseen. The British considered these tactics to be dishonorable. And we are going to go ahead and pause there. In our next section, we will read A New Nation. Bye, guys.